Listeners, most of us spend our lives chasing stability. The job that's safe, the plan that's clear, the path that makes sense. But what happens when that sense of control disappears? When life throws a storm, literal or otherwise, and suddenly everything you counted on no longer applies? Maybe it's a job loss, a dream that doesn't go the way you imagined. Or in Ian Reilly's case, a cyclone that upended everything he thought he knew about purpose, faith, and resilience. Well, today on this episode of the BizBlend podcast with your host Sana, we are talking about what it really means to live comfortably in chaos. Not just surviving it, but learning from it. How do you stay grounded when the ground itself keeps shifting? And can uncertainty actually become the best teacher you never asked for? Listeners, Ian's story isn't just about surviving disaster, it is about finding meaning when the plan collapses. And I think in a world that feels perpetually unstable, that lesson couldn't be more relevant. So, Ian, welcome to the show, and it's really an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ian, if you can take us back to that moment in Samoa. I mean, when the cyclone hit and everything changed. I mean, what was going through your mind as the world, literally fell apart around you?
Well, I think a lot of things are going through my mind, but I think the background to that is we were in our late 20s and we were going to a developing country in order to teach in a rural high school, but we'd never been overseas before. So it was rather a little bit of a shock arriving in the country, but we were only there 2 weeks when a cyclone came and it raged for 3.5 days
Mm.
and destroyed many of the buildings around us, roads, bridges, and blew down a lot of the trees. It left us without power, but it also left us without any water. We had to then go and carry our water from a spring. We were running out of food and we didn't know where we would be able to get food. And we were basically stranded and on our own. We also starved of news because this is 1990. There was no internet. Even if it had the internet, it probably would have blown down anyway. And so all we had was a shortwave radio to the outside world. And the outside world was America or Australia and New Zealand, and they didn't really have much news about a little Pacific island that didn't feature very strongly. So we found ourselves there. We had to very quickly learn to live like Samoans in a village. We went and did our laundry and washed in the local village pool, um, just like you see people doing in countries all over the world. We learned to carry our water and ration it, and then we had to start teaching, get the school up and running again. And meanwhile, armies came, various armies. The US Army arrived, the Australian Army, and the British, and they started to help with reconstruction and rebuilding roads, bridges, and getting things operational again. So that was the chaos that we went into. It was interesting, though, that we thought that was the start of the chaos, and then that once that once we got over the cyclone, that things would improve. But actually, we didn't realize that we were in a very poor country, which is pretty much out of control most of the time. And so the chaos sort of stepped up a gear once things got going. Things happened without our knowledge or control, and we just had to adapt to that as we went along. And that's what we learned to do. It was a very valuable lesson.
Wow. That is quite. I mean, I think that most of us, that's what most of us miss when we uh, talk about resilience. Often we treat it as a skill, but I think when it actually happens in reality, it is often born out of chaos or some very very life changing event. I think it's not a choice at first, but it's like surrender that becomes strength later.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Um, it was a valuable lesson for me for later in life because um, I, later I became an entrepreneur and I launched an agri-tech startup. It was with a new technology, and a startup company anywhere in the world is a little bit like slightly organized chaos. And you have to be, uh, you know, accustomed or comfortable living with dramatic change, sometimes daily, quick changes in direction, unexpected things happening. That's just part of life in a startup where things might grow really rapidly and then diminish. Sometimes you can be going really well and then suddenly find yourself insolvent and you'll lose your whole company. So it was good, experience, I think, in preparation for a life of within business. Um, yeah,
Mm. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I mean, you have lived through total disruption, Ian, like um total chaos. I mean, yet most of us, we still um crave control, or I would rather say that our mind starts to kind of crave for stability and control. So do you think that trying to plan our way out of uncertainty, it actually makes us more fragile or weak?
yeah. So I think planning is good as a business leader. I think it's very important to plan. Planning is great. Planning gives you preparation for what might follow, but you've got to expect that your plans are going to the future is going to unfold differently to what you expect. And I think that you have to expect the unexpected as part of that plan. So there's an old saying which goes back to the military, which is that a plan never survives contact with the enemy. In other words, as soon as you start a battle, unexpected things happen, and you can't just keep following your plan, or that will be a disaster. The fact that you engage changes your plans straight away, and that's very true of business too, I think. But if you don't plan, you're not prepared for that unexpected when it happens. Um, so I think where people become fragile is that they plan everything out and then their life or you know, their resilience crumbles when it doesn't go the way they expected, where they hang on to the plan as their life fulfillment. Um, and I think if you build that into, you must things must happen the way you plan or the way you hope or whatever. You're building in fragility because it won't happen that way. The world is too complicated. Life is too complex and difficult for us to predict. Um, but planning will give you good preparation. So I was prepared, I think, for a cyclone because I had grown up on a farm in Australia, and Australian farming can be a pretty unpredictable exercise. Um, the weather and the climate can be very harsh. It can change dramatically. You can go from floods to drought and back again, and you can also, go from having a really wet year to suddenly having a bushfire threaten your home and your whole livelihood. So, so I learned a lot of skills as a young boy on a farm, um, making do and seeing my father improvise with whatever he had, um, and learning some basic craft and skills and things that made a big difference later on. So I think that helps with resilience. I think the other thing is that my wife and I, are Christians. We believe that God had sent us to Samoa on purpose, that there was a purpose for us being there, and having that purpose transcended whatever would happen to us while we were there. We relied on knowing that, um, come what may, we would still stay there and we would work because that's where God had sent us, and we had that certainty in our hearts that this was the right thing to do. We didn't have certainty that everything would be nice and everything would go according to plan, because it didn't. It never did. But that doesn't mean it's not a good idea to plan. Planning is good preparation. It's the failure is when we, you know, build our life sense of worthwhile or value out of ourselves, um, in fulfilling that plan as we want it to be. Um, Another great example is having children. You can have children and think that you're going to bring them up and they're going to be wonderful and they're going to do what you say, and they're all going to unfold that way. As soon as you have a child, the child will be completely different to what you expect, and you can't control them, but you can guide them. So no, so often when people bring home their first child from the hospital, life can be very chaotic and it's very unexpected.
Yes. Yes. I think if you look at the bigger picture, I think first of all, nature itself is such a such it's a huge teacher for all of us, especially when it comes to uncertainty and chaos or resilience, because unfortunately, um lately we have been seeing how much uncertain nature can be. uh,
It's yeah.
with climate or weather changes, and temperature changes, um, and how, I mean, it can be brutal, but I think it also at the same time, um, is kind of pushing us to look for pivoting or adapting. And I think time to time that's kind of has been, the way of thriving, with the way of surviving for humans as well. um and also, as beautifully said, like parenting, it's such a there are I mean, it's such a great example of practicing leadership values, um managing through the chaos, finding stability in that chaos itself, because there are so many important moments and decisions to take, so yeah.
Yeah, and particularly parenting, it's important to enjoy those moments when they come, and not try to, you know, um, say, I've got to have this or I've got to have that, or my child must do this or must do that. Um, you can then lose those moments that come really through serendipity, more than anything else. And then you realize later on that you missed that moment; it was gone. Um, so taking advantage of opportunity, is one way to look at it. The way I looked at the chaos is that uncertainty creates opportunity. And so it's not necessarily a negative thing. If you can see that, if everything was certain and locked down, there would be no opportunity for the unknown, for the unexpected, for serendipity. Um, yeah, there would be I think, a far more boring world.
There. And also, one question that comes to my mind, Ian, is you mentioned about faith, like how it played a big role in that experience. But I'm also curious that did uncertainty ever challenge your faith instead of strengthening it?
Yeah, I think anxiety challenges our faith rather than uncertainty. I think the uncertainty is there, um, and we want certainty in life. I think that in many ways, knowing that things are out of our control in some ways is for us certainly strengthened our faith. It's when we think we have control over things and we get anxious that things aren't working out the way we expected. I think that's the biggest challenge to faith these days is anxiety. And I think, if we trust God for whatever circumstances come, then we'll be a lot less anxious. Uh, but today, these days, young people, I don't know what it's like in India, but in in Australia and the United States and Britain, um, young people have almost an epidemic of anxiety. They seem very fragile compared to previous generations, and I think that's because they have they seem they have the illusion of certainty over things. The life has been so much better than it was when we were younger. I think they've grown up with the expectation that things will unfold the way they should, and when they don't, um, they they are at loss. They don't know how to cope with that. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I think certainly the kids that I taught in Samoa who were they were some of the poorest in the world by UN measures of annual income. They would have had a few. Their families would have had a few $100 a year, US dollars a year in annual income. Um, but they were very resilient. I think um, they took, they were looking for opportunities and they took advantage of opportunity when it came, any opportunity. And they could be just by getting to know and forming a relationship with a teacher from overseas, which we were. That was an opportunity. I don't think they knew what that opportunity would unfold, but I think that's the way they saw it. Mm.
Mm.
It's like,
Uh-huh.
you know, if you if you've been exposed to a lot of diseases when you're young, probably as I was on a farm, you end up with an immune system which is very robust. But if you're protected all your life, you end up being fragile
Yeah.
because you're not used to it. You're not you
Okay.
haven't been conditioned or built up your immune system, if you like.
That is unfortunately true. That is unfortunate. That's what I also personally agree with Ian, because uh, not only physically but emotionally or mentally, we are not privy to um, uncertainty or chaotic events. So I think sometimes that's why um, when you are adulting or when you're growing up and something uh, unfavorable or something really, really chaotic happens, you don't have any idea how to tackle that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And certainly, for people in your audience who are looking at becoming entrepreneurs or going into business or something, um, compared to a job that you might get in another business or a corporation where you're an employee, that life can be very uncertain and chaotic. But at the same time, it presents wonderful opportunities. Um, Quite often, people are, I think, surprised at how many times you have to fail before you succeed. But the failure is important. The failure builds resilience and it builds learning and it builds experience. And that makes a huge difference. We, when we're younger, we want to succeed at everything, but um, sometimes learning to fail and pick yourself up and keep going and fail again and pick yourself up and keep going is the way that you build strength and resilience. Um,
yeah.
yeah, for later on.
Hmm. And you are also an artist, an engineer, and a founder. I think all of these three roles, they demand completely different parts of your brain. Um,
Yes,
Um,
in a way, but in a way um, they demand the same type of creativity. I think to be an entrepreneur, you do need to be creative. To be an engineer, as I was a design engineer. I created new products for companies around the world. So I worked for some of the world's largest corporations. Coca-Cola was a client. General Electric was a client. And through to some of these Silicon Valley startups and startups in Switzerland and other parts of Europe. Um, and so working with those companies to create a new product demands the same level of creativity that I would use to create a painting or to write a book. So I've just finished the book Encounter, which describes that experience of going through the cyclone and then the aftermath. Um, and so at the moment, I'm busy being creative in marketing that book and getting that message out to people. Um, so I think there's a thread there that may not have been clear to me early on in my career, but it's clear
Mhm.
now that there's a need to be creative. I think the perhaps the unusual thing about me is that I can be highly creative at one end, but also I'm a completer finisher. So I do also manage and direct and control and measure as well. Um, and that, helped me finish jobs and help deliver success for my clients, being able to do that. But painting is I paint in the same way I would write or create a new product. I start with an overall goal and a framework, and then I work on creating the elements that will make up that bigger picture. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. But we just romanticize, like, as a version of struggle, that we tell ourselves to kind of justify discomfort.
Mm. Yeah, I think we romanticize when we look back, but when we're going through it, it's pretty tough. It's always tough when you're there. It's always hard at the time. I mean, in the middle of the cyclone, we had been wet for 2 days. We had rain blowing horizontally through our house
Yeah.
continuously, and there was a roaring wind, and we saw buildings disintegrate around us. So that was pretty tough when you're there, when you're trying to get some sleep when everything is wet, including your clothes and your bedding and everything. But it makes for a great story when you look back. And sure, you know, you can romanticize it later. It's always tough when you're there. It's always tougher than in the moment. Mm.
Yeah. And I think I mean it's funny because whenever we talk about business or creativity, we celebrate disruption, but um in life, uh, in personally, I would still avoid um chaos at all costs. um and maybe I think the real difference is how much we control we think we have over the chaos, we choose versus
Thick we have, yeah.
the chooses us. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't still go for, just or I would still prefer that I should do something which can restore or maintain stable
Order.
order. Exactly. Exactly.
Yes, well, I think that's our role, really, to make some order in the chaos. We, all of our, civilization itself, no matter where you go, is man's attempt to create order out of the chaos around them. Um, Even if you think about cooking a meal on a fire in three rocks, that's what you're doing. You're making order out of the fire, out of the chaos of that's around you to do that. So I think that's important. Um, I just don't think. Um, I think we have to recognise that the chaos is always there, encroaching on us. That life is unexpected. Things go wrong. I mean, over the last 25 years, we've seen for us 9/11, which created, that was a big event that upset airlines and travel and business. And at the time, I was working for a company that did all its business outside of Australia. So we were flying a lot.
Yeah.
We had friends grounded in New York. And so that was chaotic. And then we seemed to get things, in better control. And then the dot-com crash came, and that threw a whole lot of chaos into our business because we had clients who were, paying us to do work, and all of a sudden overnight, the work just vanished. We had people that we couldn't employ, we couldn't pay their wages. So we got over that, and then the global financial crisis hit. Um, we got over that, and then there were aftershocks of that, which went on for 3 or 4 years. Um, and then, even, recently we had COVID,
Yeah.
you know.
Yep.
Um, we haven't had a pandemic like that for 100 years, but now every 100 years or so they do come. So yeah, that was a big shock, and that created an enormous amount of chaos globally, an enormous amount of uncertainty for people. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think uh, kind of in backdrop, it also really it kind of showed us this mirror that um some events can be so life changing that it can affect every single person on this planet,
Mm.
every single person on this planet. I mean we are very quick to comment or say for others, when their lives get affected.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But when it
Yeah.
comes to us, we kind of, our first And the quickest mode is to get into that state of denial. But no, 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 this is not true. This is something very strange. And we kind of get into that rabbit hole. Why is this happening? What will happen? Kind of focus on the future. But I think most of us, we kind of live in that state of denial in the present moment.
Yeah, that's right. So in my book, An Encounter, I preface each chapter with a quote from the life of or the teaching of Jesus. And one of those, he says to his disciples, "Don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow has enough worries of itself, and just focus on today." And certainly that's one way, you know, to help manage your way through disasters like that is just to focus on one day at a time. Get through one day and then the next day, and that I think can be very comforting to people. Just to worry about today, and then tomorrow worry about tomorrow. Mm, can be helpful. One of the um, comforting things I think about certainly the start of COVID was that the whole world almost went into lockdown all at once in 2020, and everyone in every country, I was in touch with friends in Europe and in Asia and in America and my brother who lives in Mexico, and we were all going through the same troubles at the same time. And we all had the same shortages of things at the same time. And in a way, I found that was quite unusual, but comforting to know that the whole world was in that, together. It didn't last, and it all broke up and people started doing different things. Um, but for a while there, the whole world was in lockdown together, looking at each other and wondering what was going to happen next.
Mm, yeah. So, Ian, before we wrap up, if listeners they would like to connect with you and also get a hold of your book, what would be the best way?
So my website is ianreilly.com.au. That would be the best way. The title of the book is Encounter: A Journey into Chaos, Culture, and Compassion. So the book covers the cyclone, which is the chaos at the start, but then the remainder of the book then moves into trying to live and work in a radically different culture. That was a big learning for us, where things were sometimes totally different to what we thought, and we thought there were things that were pretty weird. But after a while, we came to know that that made sense in a small Pacific Island community. And then lastly, compassion was about the students that came into our lives that we were able to, to serve and get to know and become part of life in a village. So that's the chaos, culture, and then compassion.
Super, superb. So, listeners, I'm going to have all the links and details in the show notes. And I think, and Ian, listening to you and through this entire conversation, I think one thing, it kept coming back to this thought that maybe chaos isn't the opposite of peace. I think it's the teacher that keeps peace from becoming, just another thing or like a complacency for us.
Yeah,
So
it's a it's the chaos at the margins of our control is where the opportunity lies.
yeah.
Mm.
And thank you so much, Ian, once again, for really, really this um, detailed conversation, sharing your journey, the moments, and for your wonderful insights as well.
You're very welcome. It's been great to chat.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And to all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of BizBlend. So whether you are standing in the middle of a storm or watching the clouds roll in, please remember that control isn't the goal, presence is. And that's the real art of living comfortably in chaos. Keep listening to BizBlend, subscribe to us, leave us a review. And until next time, this is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.